Okay, continuing around the blue disc, we come to the third section, norming. In the norming phase, we're starting to see a lot of team cooperation. People are starting to enjoy working together, and they have a pretty clear understanding of what each other's roles are on the team. They know who is capable of what and what types of interaction are required in order to work well together. So they take even a further step to potentially even develop procedures, documents that need to be processed or steps that need to be taken in order to make the team work well. The team, in fact, is developing what we call team skills, not individual skills, but the ability for them to work as a team. They know how to confront issues now as a team, and they know how to solve problems together as a team. It becomes a very positive experience for the people who are members of the team. So in fact, what happens is the team now moves away from this storming phase and into a cooperative norming phase, and morale starts to build positively. Our final stop around the blue disc is the fourth stage of performing. The group moves away from the norming stage to the performing stage very quickly after they have established the ability to work together as a team. During this phase, the team is actually performing the tasks that are necessary to accomplish the goals and objectives of the program. It is usually a level of productivity that is not exceeded at any other time during the program. They're a very productive group at this point. The reason they're productive is because they have become very efficient at what they do. There is a high degree of trust among the members because they have seen each other take on new and different tasks, and they've seen that they can, in fact, succeed in doing that. There also, at this stage, becomes a point of flexibility that has never been seen since the control stage. During the control stage, a lot of rigid procedures and structures are being put in place in terms of how the team interacts with each other that begins to show its face in the norming phase. But now, at the performing phase, the team can start to become a little bit more flexible. In fact, at this point, the team members will actually become supportive of one another to help each other struggle through issues that each individual is dealing with so that the team as a whole can succeed. The team will develop a level of confidence, and also the individuals on the team will develop a little confidence as well. They'll understand that their role and their value to the team is critical and that they need to be there and that they are a valuable contributor. All of this leads to much higher morale. The team, in fact, will operate in a very efficient, a very high morale perspective that has never been seen before on the project. This period in the project could go for many, many years, but typically it never goes more than a few weeks or a few months. As project manager, your job is to understand that these are the 4 stages of development that all teams are naturally going to go through. Since your team members come from different areas of the company and they haven't worked together before, unless on other teams, they probably are going to go through these 4 stages. Is your job as project manager to manage these stages? Well, not necessarily. All teams just naturally go through this form of evolution. However, it is your job to make sure that each of these stages moves fluidly, and that if there are any problems that prohibit progress through these phases, that they're addressed quickly so that the team can, in fact, move forward into the performing stage. Now that we've covered all of the stages of team development, we can view that development from a standpoint of effectiveness. So on this slide, we're plotting effectiveness profile as a function of the team life cycle. On the vertical axis is team effectiveness, and on the horizontal axis is time, project time. So as you can see, like we discussed before, during the first formative stages of a new team, the effectiveness level is fairly good. There's not a lot of conflict yet, but quickly when people start to develop relationships, there's conflict, there's power negotiations, a lot of issues that undermine the effectiveness of the team. And oftentimes the team has a feeling that they have time at this point to not work so hard. They see the whole project period ahead of them, and they feel like it's time just to enjoy getting to know each other and building the team. So effectiveness is fairly low during what's called the entrenchment period. About halfway through the product life cycle, though, the team has resolved all of the internal conflict issues and starting to become more effective. They've resolved all the entrenchment, and they begin to be quite concerned about the ability of the team to accomplish its objectives with only half the project time or nearly half the project time remaining. So at that point, the team becomes very, very productive. And in fact, one of the key roles of the project manager is to make sure that transition occurs very quickly, as we discussed before. After this happens, then the team synergy is high, and the accommodation of people and the needs for resources is also very effective. And that's when the project actually transpires and work gets done. And eventually, as the project comes to its end, there's a decline in effectiveness because we start to have fewer things to work on, and we have fewer people, fewer pieces of equipment, and the budget starts to dwindle away. And eventually we go into what's called breakup. In other words, the project is complete and the project team no longer has a life going forward. This breakup period is preceded by, as we mentioned before, a very difficult time for the project manager because there's a lot of things that need to be accomplished during this decline phase. As a project manager, it is your role to form your project team. You will probably have a lot of support from senior management in forming the team. The resources will come from the various line managers, and since they are not your line managers, they report to the CEO or president, you will need to work with the top management in order to identify the resources. So it is impossible, however, to identify the needed resources until we first have a very good, well-defined project objective. We need to know what the definition of the objective is, and we also need to know what kinds of skills and work roles are needed to accomplish those objectives. Now that we've defined the project in sufficient detail that we can identify what types of skills and roles are going to be needed, the next step is to now define those skills and those roles that are needed. So we can go through each and every task within the project description as we have it now and begin to understand what kinds of people and what kinds of skills will we need. At this point, we can literally start to create a list of different types of skills that are required to implement the project and start to imagine where those people will come from who will provide those skills. For example, will they be accountants? Will they be lawyers? Will they be engineers? Maybe the people who will be providing the skills we need will be general business skills, or maybe technical skills like, for example, website design or app design. We can now start to generate a detailed list of the types of skills that are required to implement the project. Now we get into the meat of planning the project. So what we do in planning the project is we create a series of documents that help us visually express our plans for the project. The first one is highlighted here as the Work Breakdown Structure, or WBS. The second one is the Responsibility Assignment Matrix, or RAM. And the third one is a network diagram. These three documents constitute the primary communication and planning tools that we'll be discussing in this class. In more advanced classes, there will be quite a large number of documents constructed at this point, but this is primarily what we are looking at right now in this class. So in building our team, now it's time to find the right persons for the right jobs. And so we're now working to assign people in the responsibility assignment matrix, specific people for specific tasks and jobs and roles. In doing this, we will be negotiating directly, probably with the line managers. The line managers have a lot of responsibilities they need to fulfill in operating the company. And their people, and their equipment are necessary to accomplish those goals and objectives. Anytime we pull people and resources from the line manager, it could have an adverse effect on their regular operations. And so moving people out of the line manager's direct control is always going to have an adverse effect on the line manager's ability to accomplish their objectives. That's why this is a negotiation. Normally, the line managers are going to be very cooperative, and they will do whatever they can to provide whatever resources they believe you need. However, it is a negotiation, and you do need to be able to provide a strong and compelling argument to them to explain why they need to release resources to you for your project. If for some reason you're not able to achieve what you need by doing that, you always have the ability to go to their boss and to explain the problem. You will probably go with the line manager to describe the issue, or maybe you will have a private conversation. But regardless, the people above the line manager normally have a very clear reason for asking you to manage the project, and they are likely to be very supportive of your needs to acquire resources to accomplish the goals of the project. So at this point, hopefully by the time we finish this step, we have all the people in place who are going to be required to successfully execute the project. So the final step in putting together the team is now talking with the individuals who will be actually working on the team about the project and securing their full commitment and buy-in to supporting the project. It's not sufficient to have the blessing of senior management, in fact, the direction of senior management, and the buy-in from all the line managers that you can access their resources. As project manager, we also need to know that the people individually and collectively are emotionally, mentally, and physically capable of taking on the project. So this involves literally sitting down with each and every person and talking with them one-on-one or maybe two-on-one and describing exactly what you're hoping they will accomplish, describing the vision and the value of the project for the company and why their role is important. It's also important to explain to them the level of commitment and energy and time that you're expecting them to deliver to the project team in order for the project to be successful. After this discussion, as project manager, you're finally looking for an acknowledgement from them that they will, in fact, take on the responsibility and the role that you expect them to in order to execute the project. This may take the form of simply a smile and a statement of agreement, maybe a handshake, or in fact, it could in fact be reduced to a signed agreement at this point. There will be plenty of opportunities for that later, but at this point it might be really important to have that, depending on the type of project you're managing. The last item on this slide for building a team is to perform a test run. In other words, we want to find a way to develop a simple project, a mini project, that will help the team members explore the needs of the project and their roles. This is the very beginning of the 4 stages of team development we discussed earlier: the forming, storming, norming, and performing. This is the forming stage. In this stage, we will be bringing the team together and making sure that everyone knows each other and what their skills and capabilities are, and give them a task to start to work together. This task mainly serves the role to help them get started in discovering each and everyone's personalities and capabilities, and to start to develop ways for them to work together. This is about as far as we need to go at this point, but it does serve another purpose. It also helps you as project manager to discover any hidden problems that may exist among the team members that you were unaware of. It also may help you identify areas where resources are missing. Sometimes the team members will point that out. They will say, while they're doing the exercise, that, we really need to have this type of skill on this project. They might even identify a specific person who has that skill. And you can now discuss that with the team to determine whether or not that skill is needed right away, or needed later, or maybe not needed at all. As project manager, it is then your role to go and take care of that issue. So now we have a team, we have full buy-in from management and all the team members. We've managed to start the team working together, and we're moving toward being able to function on the project. Now we will talk about the planning documents that are necessary to put together the framework of our project. The first and probably the most important document that we will be talking about is the Work Breakdown Structure, or the WBS. So why do we do the WBS, and what function does it serve? At this point, we know that we have a project, and the project will start at a certain date. And we also know that we will have a completion date with a very well-defined objective. What we don't have is the details in the middle. We think we have an idea. We may even have some details in our mind at this point, but we don't have a very detailed schedule. We haven't broken down each and every task of the project with sufficient detail to really manage the project well. This is the function of, first off, building the work breakdown structure. And it starts by basically an echo of the project management objectives. We now can start to put together a schedule that shows the major goals of the project in a series. And so, as you see in the second diagram, we have a project start, followed by goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and finally goal 4 to complete the project. This is a very simple diagram, and it doesn't really reflect what a work breakdown structure is, but it starts to get to the concept of a work breakdown structure. We're now putting pieces in between the start and the end of the project that describe the major activities, and then we're going to break them down one by one until we get down to the very lowest level of detail, something that is managed by an individual person or a small team of people. But the first thing to do is to identify the major goals of the project, and then to document them in this form. Looking more carefully at the details of the work breakdown structure, we develop a table that looks like the one we have here on this slide. So we took the 4 items that we identified from the prior slide, and we broke them down into much more detail. At the top we have a box labeled 1.0, and in fact, probably we would put the name of the project in here along with the number. For example, if we are going to build a website, then we could put in there 1.0, build a website. And then under that we have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4 that correspond with the major objectives that will be accomplished during the project. Now, these aren't necessarily aligned in time sequence. They're simply listed as major items that are necessary to achieve on the project. Beneath each of those boxes, we have more details. We've now broken down each of these tasks into finer and finer details. For example, under 1.1, we have several items, 1.1.1, 1.1.2, etc. Under 1.2, you can see that we have 1.2.1, 1.2.2, and then we've even broken down item 1.2.2 into two more details. So each and every one of these major task areas can be broken down into finer and finer levels of project activities that need to be accomplished during the entire project. Again, we're not looking at a time sequence here. We're simply looking at the things that need to be accomplished in order for each of the major tasks items to be delivered for the project. In this way, we can continue to break this down finer and finer. For example, building a website could be broken into 4 tasks like like building a contract with the client, and then doing a framework, and then writing the code, and then finally testing. Those major 4 blocks could be further broken down. For example, in testing, it could be, first goal would be to describe all of the functional blocks that need to be tested. Number 2 would be coming up with the specifications that need to be achieved for each test. Number 3 might be writing the software that's necessary to perform the testing, and that could be further broken down into the details of each section of the code. And then finally running the tests, and then another one evaluating. So as you can see, each major task area can be broken down into smaller and smaller items that need to be delivered in order to achieve the task. Now, how far do you want to go? Now, clearly, we could break down work into finer and finer levels of detail. So my way of doing this is not necessarily unique, but it's the way I prefer, is to break them down to the point where we can literally put a specific person's name in each and every one of those boxes. We can identify a specific person who is responsible for making sure that that task is achieved and achieved correctly. This is very important to know who is going to be responsible for delivering each one of those tasks. If we haven't broken it down that far, in other words, the task includes activities from a broad range of people or a team of people, then we might want to consider dividing the task into additional more tasks, like breaking it down further to the point where we can literally put one person's name in each box. So that's the work breakdown structure. And it helps if we also assign codes like we have here in this diagram, numbers. The reason why is because the numbers are much smaller than a descriptive title. The descriptive title can include lots of words, but the numbers are obviously very short as long as we keep track of which number corresponds with which task. So here's an example work breakdown structure for us to get a little bit better idea of what it might look like. Instead of drawing a diagram with boxes like we showed on the prior slide, here we're simply listing in table form or outline form what the items of the work breakdown structure are. So the example we're going to work with here would be, for example, a IT project. The number one deliverable for the IT installation project is defined as match IT to organizational tasks and problems. Furthermore, we've broken down that deliverable to 1.1 and 1.2, which are conduct problem analysis and develop information on IT technology. The second deliverable on our IT installation project is defined as identify IT user needs. We've further broken that down into three separate subtasks, 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. These are defined as interview potential users, develop presentation of IT benefits, and third, gain user buy-in to system. So you can see in both deliverables number 1 and number 2, we are breaking down the major tasks into subtasks. Our third major deliverable on the IT installation project is prepare informal proposal. Here we have two subtasks, 3.1 and 3.2. We continue to add deliverables to the project, 4, 5, 6, 7, and each one of those are broken down into smaller subcategories and subtasks that need to be accomplished in order for each of the major deliverables to be achieved. And this way we can write out the work breakdown structure in an outline form as opposed to using a visual chart. So the work breakdown structure is the first and most important step in planning a project in terms of building out the resources, the objectives, the deliverables, the costs, and more importantly, the schedules associated with all those items. So this is where it all starts. Now we've finished the work breakdown structure, and we'll move on to the next major planning document, the assignment matrix. In fact, this is usually called the Resource Assignment Matrix, or the RAM. As you can see, it is a table. Across the top row of the table, we've listed the various tasks that we identified on the work breakdown structure. We're using the number associated with the task, or the code, simply because it's much more compact and simpler to write. On the far left-hand column, we have the name of the person who's responsible for the various activities on our project. And as you can see, there is a place for each task where we have a letter L in red. In other words, leader of responsibility, or the lead for that task. The intersection between the person's name and the task number is a designation to show us who is responsible for that particular task. In other words, as project manager, this shows you which person you're going to go to ask questions, to get updates, to get project reviews regarding that task. We're also showing other people who are involved in a particular task, and these are designated by the words support and notification, or notified, and approves. So that would be S, N, and A. Notice that there's only one lead for each task. It is very inefficient to have multiple people in charge of a task. In fact, it can create a lot of unnecessary conflict. We only have one person in charge of each task. However, of course, there may be several people who are providing support. There may be several people that need to be notified about what's transpiring on the report. That's shown, for example, under task number 1.3.1.3 toward the far right-hand side of the table. There can also be a person who checks and approves, and that's usually only one person. We can designate other people with other responsibilities and identify them using the assignment matrix as we've shown here. But this is really a key fundamental step. As project manager, we need to go and talk with each and every person on the project to make sure that we have their 100% commitment to be involved in these tasks in the way we're describing on the assignment matrix. As is shown on the slide, we are recognizing that the work breakdown structure and the assignment matrix are the two fundamental building blocks to building a comprehensive plan. The other one is now the network diagram. With the three elements of the work breakdown structure, the responsibility assignment matrix, and the network diagram, we will now be able to move forward to build a comprehensive and very detailed schedule for the plan. We will also be able to start to identify the budget for the plan and how the budget evolves throughout the schedule. So this is basically the stepping point to getting into the most fundamental part of our planning. The first step to building a network diagram is to go back to our work breakdown structure, the WBS, and to identify where there are dependencies among the various tasks on the WBS. We're looking for tasks which cannot be completed or started until we have finished or started previous tasks. So we're starting to add an element of time to the task list. For example, if you are going to work on a particular day, you can't actually start working at the office until you go to the office. So the dependency there is travel to the office has to be completed before you can actually start working at the office. That's an example of a dependency where starting one task depends on completing a prior task. There are a number of different types of dependencies, and in the following slides, I'll give you several examples and diagrams that help us understand those dependencies. Once we understand the dependencies and we can outline them in detail on the WBS information, we can now create a schedule. So we'll work into that in the next few slides. The network diagram is a graphical representation of the flow of events on a project. It also shows the dependencies among the various items on the project as well, the ones that we identified on the work breakdown structure. So basically, we're just showing how the project progresses over time and the interdependencies among the various tasks on the work breakdown structure. At a fundamental level, the network diagram addresses two key questions. The first one is what tasks must be completed before other tasks can begin. So this is one of the key pieces about the flow of work on a project. What project items have to be completed before we can start the next project item? The second question it asks and addresses is what tasks can actually be done at the same time. Either there's no dependency among them, or they can all start at the same time based on some previous task that's already completed. So these two questions are fundamentally addressed by the network diagram. In reality, the network diagram actually can be far more complicated than represented by these two items. We will get into the various forms of dependencies among tasks shortly here, and you'll begin to see that some of them, most of them in fact, are very, very simple. But network diagramming does allow for some fairly complex interdependencies and precedences. We'll show those to you next.